Wow, thanks. Great to see so many people here. So finally filled in. I gave a presentation earlier to kick this off, and there weren't quite as many people, but happy to see you all here today to talk about bringing brands into your games. So my name is Darren Smith. I'm the VP of Product at Epik. Epik is the leading B2B NFT platform that works with giant entertainment IP and AAA game companies to bring brands, to create in-game marketplaces and NFTs into those games. We have years of experience as a digital licensing agency, bringing brands into games. And our current client roster includes giant entertainment IP and other companies, including Tencent, Garena, Universal, and many more. A little bit about me, for those of you who weren't here earlier, I'm a video game industry veteran. I was at Nintendo for 20 years, working on the development of game consoles like the Nintendo 64 and the Wii and the 3DS. I worked on some games with Mr. Miyamoto and some other cool things, and was very happy while there. I retired from there in 2011 and did some consulting in the video game industry. And in 2018, I joined Epik with a mission to bring NFTs into games. So, next slide, please. Oh, I can't see it on this monitor, by the way, so if it's possible to put it on this monitor, it'd be great. So today I'm going to bring something to you at the execution level. First, I'm going to talk about the psychology behind the NFT hype. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the business of licensing and how it works. And lastly, I'm going to give you a playbook to help you get licensed content into your games. Next slide, please. Oh, great. Let's start with this. We've all heard of crypto whales like Justin Sun and celebrities like Steph Curry paying big money to buy, rocks and Bored Apes. The question is, why are these people really getting involved? Why does somebody like Steph Curry flaunt that Bored Ape on Twitter and even has made it his own avatar? Why is he doing that? Well, that's because people pay real money for virtual goods for the same reason they pay real money for any consumer commodity, namely status, identity, membership, class, and performance. Next slide, please. What Steph Curry is signaling to the rest of the world is he's really in the know. He knows crypto, he knows NFTs, and it's really become part of his identity. Next slide, please. Does this sound familiar? Well, it's the same psychology behind what's driving people to buy name brand stuff. Brand affinity is a way to signal certain messages to the rest of the world about yourself. Are you a Ferrari guy or are you a Tesla guy? Are you an Apple user or an iPhone user? When we're talking about brand name items, we're really talking about IP licensing. And the term licensing means the granting of rights to use another party's intellectual property in your own products or services in exchange for financial considerations, typically a payment or royalty. So whenever you make a piece of digital art yourself, that's your IP, you own that. And now you can sell and monetize it. And that idea of IP ownership is the same whether it's part of the creator economy, or you or I are maker something, as it is for big brands like Disney or Marvel. So as you can see, everything NFT is IP, and it's all about licensing. Next slide, please. So we talk with IP owners all the time, and I wanted to share with you how they are looking at NFTs today. So for licensors, the most important thing for them to understand is that NFTs are a completely new product category with some really interesting features that can make them extremely powerful. As we all know, with NFTs we can verify ownership. With an NFT and a digital wallet, it's like a bearer certificate. And second, as we all know, NFTs are digital, so it can represent virtually anything. It can contain a reference, any kind of reference, or a reference to a value, whatever. And that means we get to do really cool things with your product and merchandising strategy, as well as your marketing engagement with your customers. When you combine all these elements of brand affinity, a new asset class, and a new product category, you'll get endless possibilities in how you can incorporate this IP, and it's really up to your own creativity how you do that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the metaverse. This is the next big area of opportunity for licensing and NFTs. We strongly believe that NFTs will be the unifying feature and force behind the interconnectivity of metaverses. And really, it's the fabric of the metaverse itself. It's the digital stuff that's open, interoperable, transferable, and permanent. Licensing and using IP in a metaverse can be extremely important for you from a business strategy perspective. It may even be a necessity for you to bridge the real world into the metaverse. NFTs really provide the way for you to go from Web 2 to Web 3. So you see Starbucks in the real world, you see Starbucks in the virtual world, and you can connect the dots. Next slide, please. So as promised, let's do a quick dive into a playbook that I've created for you. It's a 4-part licensing playbook. Chapter 1, we're going to talk about the field of play. Chapter 2, I'm going to talk about who the players are. Chapter 3, I'm going to talk about some strategies, and we'll discuss whether or not you're ready to license IP and what you can do about it if you're not. And then we'll talk about the end game. Next slide, please. So what is licensing? I gave you a dictionary definition earlier, but in short, it's really just paying to use someone else's IP in your own products and services. The concept seems straightforward, but in reality, it's not always so straightforward. The not so well-known truth about licensing is that it's not what you know, and it's not necessarily even how much money you have, but it's really who you know. Licensing is really interesting because it hasn't been disrupted. Even in the age of the internet, it's all relationship-based, and getting the right access is key, so it requires a relationship. And of course, it's about legal rights and contracts too. So that's kind of the history of licensing. It hasn't changed much over a few decades. But what about the future? What about blockchain? Well, yes, blockchain and licensing are definitely very compatible because licensing is about legal contracts and rights. And smart contracts give us a way to improve the creation and enforcement of those rights and removing some of the friction and the overhead. And that's the future we're really working towards at Epik. We're using tech to create some solutions that help us overcome some of the complex workflow in licensing. Next slide, please. Yes, maybe? Well, let's talk about the players. And let's start with your opponent, the licensor, the IP holder. One of the most important things to understand is the mindset of a licensor. You're going to be sitting down with them at a negotiation table, and it's really important to understand what their biggest motivations are. Yeah, money is important. It's definitely a consideration. But you may find that the bigger the brand, the less interested they are in money, and the more they are interested in their own reputation. Different licensors may also have different strategies in how many deals they want to do at any one time. This may be a good analogy here. Might be that some licensors might want to be more like Robert De Niro, who appears in something every once in a couple of years, versus those that want to be more like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who's in virtually everything, everywhere, all the time. There's also a lot of things that are part of the licensor that might not be under your control. Things like the structure of the company. Some might just be an individual single owner company, a family-run IP, or it could be a giant publicly traded company with a licensing committee. It's not a simple situation since every IP is different, and you should really understand them best to know how to approach them. That brings us to another player who develops your IP strategy, and that's the quarterback. And then next slide, please. The quarterback is really thinking about who's doing all this activity for you and who's the one that's going to help you navigate all this stuff. Licensing is really complex, so what's your plan? How are you going to access these IP owners? How much are you going to pay? What are the terms? Who calls the plays? This is really everything that's under the quarterback's control. And this role can be either internal or external to your company. Internally, you might hire somebody in with this kind of expertise, maybe build out your own business development team. Alternative, externally, you can work with an agent. And there's certain advantages of working with an agent. A good way to look at working with a licensing agent is like working with a real estate agent when you're buying a house. Just like a real estate agent do the heavy lifting for you and might bring you right property to you, a licensing agent can do all the heavy lifting and speed up your process and give you some valuable insights you might not already have. So is an agent necessary? No, not necessarily. You can buy a house without a real estate agent. You can license content without a licensing agent either. That's certainly up to you. But in short, it's really important to consider who's going to be your quarterback in handling that process. But first, a reality check. Not everyone's ready to become a licensee to attract licensors to work with them. Why is that? Well, because like I said, it's not always about the money. Brands are looking for the right fit, the right reputation, the right timing. And it doesn't mean you can't get there. There's some suggestions we have to help you improve your chances for getting a license. First, you can start by gathering the data. Gathering data about yourself, getting some compelling metrics about engagement in your brand, in your game or your metaverse, and other KPI beyond the money. You should also be open-minded to the IP you want to work with. In the marketplace, some of the best performing collaborations that we've had have been when there wasn't quite a perfect fit between the IP and the game, but it's that kind of difference is the fun stuff that you don't normally see, and it can make the game actually fun. You can also join forces. Don't go it alone. Epik has been really successful in putting IP into multiple games at the same time under the same campaign. And this is something you can do too if you don't want to buy the IP on your own. So there's definitely ways you can get access to IP and increase your attractiveness to IP owners. Approach it like a journey, and maybe someday Disney will come knocking at your door. Next slide, please. The name of the game with IP is content, and there's nothing more exciting than new original content. And crossovers are an awesome way to create new content and new merchandise that's actually perfect for digital collectibles. These crossovers happen in a number of different categories. It happens on music all the time when artists collaborate with one another. It happens a lot in fashion. Supreme and Louis Vuitton is one example. And it also happens in games. Games companies do it all the time, and it's exciting and unique. And it happens, when it does happen, it's an idea that you can explore with your own IP. So next slide, please. Let's talk about the end game. One of the first things you should do as you start down this road of licensing IP is to ask yourself why. In our experience working with hundreds of game companies and marketplaces, the reason we most hear are to increase user engagement. Brands give you more marketing tools to play with. To increase user retention, brands give you some fresh content that keeps players coming back. To increase monetization, name brands sell, and there's definitely an opportunity to capitalize on that. Another reason to license IP is to boost your game's profile. This creates more credibility for your company. Working with big brands definitely adds perceived value to your customers and to your investors. Think about all of that before you start making big investments into IP. Last slide, please. So to summarize the playbook we put together for you to help you on your IP journey, we have 1, know and understand the field the player on. 2, know the players, pick your team, and most importantly, that quarterback. 3, execute your strategies to get your licensed IP. And 4, start with the end in mind and ask yourself why. Thank you all. I hope you learned something about the business of licensing. And please visit our booth on the entrance of the west entrance of the hall there. And also please check all the cool stuff we have on our website at epicprime.com. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.